Well, here we are live. Excuse me. Live,
Live in
yes,
color.
live and in. I have my. I'm wearing orange today
Oh,
for religious
oh, I
purposes.
forgot. I'm sorry to kick this off at the top, but if I don't do it now, I'm going to forget.
Okay,
It's a big night for you tonight.
why?
At 11:30 tonight,
I'll be asleep.
Perry
What about Perry?
hold on for a second. It's when I have to turn off the YouTube so it doesn't interfere with it. Tonight at 11:30, it's going to be the Perry Mason episode with Betty Davis.
Oh, the case of Constant Doyle.
Yes,
Oh well, I'll watch it in the morning. Thanks for letting me know. I DVR them and watch them the nenext day.
it's
Welcome,
tonight.
good. Welcome tonight to the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Uh, the show that is continuing on a nightly basis in the midst of pandemics, uh, lockdowns, quarantines, wet snow possibilities in May, and what's left? Locusts, we said. You thought maybe locusts are coming? I don't know.
I don't know, Joe. I really don't. This is a wacko weather scenario. I haven't seen anything like this, and you have not in over 40 years. 1977, May 9th was the last time we had flurries here on the 9th of May, that late in the season. Although a little bit later on in the show, I did find from the reference works of David Ludlam some snowfalls that came even later in the calendar, believe it or not.
Wow. Well, let's get to it because I'm sure everybody's all very excited uh,
Yeah.
to take a look at all of this. And just by the way, want to just say welcome to those of you who are watching us via Facebook, Twitter, or the free meteorologist Joe Chaffee weather app that you can download on Google Play or on the App Store. So let's get to it. Let's get rid of the current weather first. There's not a whole lot of it, so we can do that front and center. And one thing that happened today, Joe, with respect to all the clouds that rolled in, although every once in a while the sky did try to brighten out here. We also had just a few minimal drops of rain, but this evening, as we're looking at things, northeast wind, onshore flow, and everywhere from pretty much Maryland all the way up into southern and southeastern New England. Most temperatures are in the 40s and have been in the upper 40s to low 50s pretty much all day long.
It was, it didn't turn out to be as bad a day as I thought it might turn out to be because we actually had some sunshine here during the early part of the day today. In fact, I was probably the only person around who was like cursing the sun. I said,
Yeah,
"What are you doing out there?"
I did
And
see
I
the
was supposed to be out
I
there.
did see the clearing line at one point this morning on the northern horizon, and I noticed on the loop this morning that the cloud line wasn't that far north, at least initially, but that's all gotten taken care of. But this weather system for tonight is actually not overly impressive. When you look on the satellite loop, the clouds are kind of broken in spots, especially as you head down south. There's no real strong moisture flow coming out of the Atlantic or the Gulf of Mexico. This is working on whatever Atlantic moisture that it has, and it really doesn't have very much. And plus, you've got this upper air trough that is not the most impressive trough in the world, and that is moving along. And meantime, Joe, look up in the Pacific Northwest, and you can already see the first piece of the puzzle for uh, Friday and for the weekend as we watch energy now moving up into the northern Rockies. You still can't quite see, at least on this loop, you can't see yet the northern shortwave trough that's going to be coming down through the Great Lakes and then swinging into the northeast and phasing with that northern plain system to just make for a very, very cold weekend. That we know. And then we'll see what happens late Friday into early Saturday when the low goes by to see whether we get some wet snowflakes mixing in down at the coast and well inland. And I'm thinking at least above 1,500, maybe up above 1,500 feet is where you'd probably have to look for some sort of accumulation.
Well, the categorical numbers on both the NAM and GFS Moss, are going for, by Saturday morning, 60 to 70% probability of snow, even in New York City, would you believe? So,
Yeah, I actually would believe it. It's definitely going to be cold enough aloft. You just get a little bit of intensity to cool the column down. It wouldn't be a big shocker if we saw some wet flakes mixed down to the ground.
and if you did see that in New York on Saturday, early in the day, that would tie for the latest snowfall that has ever been noted, at least in the modern history. And I'm going back now to 1869. That's when they started keeping records in New York City, weather records. May 9th has always been and still stands as the latest that snow has ever been sighted. Now, if you go to the almanac page on the Upton Weather Service website, you'll see a notation for trace in the snow column from May 29th. But as we found out from our dear friend Mr. Goodman over at the National Weather Service, that is not for snow, that is actually for hail.
Hail.
So,
And hail is
so
not sleet. That was
hail
actually
is not
hail out of a thunderstorm. So,
right.
yes, May 9th is the magical day. And that was 43 years ago, 1977. Amazing. Time just flies, doesn't it?
It does.
I was a senior in high school at the time.
I remember that very well.
Uh,
I was, in fact, I'll tell you exactly where I was that day. Believe it or not, I do have a memory. They say, Joe, that if you have some sort of a stimulus for each day of your life, you could remember some facts about each day of your life. Without the stimulus, like we all remember, those of us of a certain age remember where we were when Kennedy was shot, when the Challenger blew up. These are things that, you remember what you were doing because that was the stimulus.
right.
May 9th, 1977, I was with Stan Gesselman, one of my professors at City College. We were on a field trip. We went to Fort Taunton, where we were watching them launch. I don't think they do this at Fort Taunton anymore, but they were launching radiosondes, weather balloons from Fort Taunton. We went there in the late afternoon, early evening to watch the evening or the zero Z launch of uh, this weather balloon. And that was the same day that we had chilly temperatures and also snow showers and flurries in and around the New York area. It was a very weird situation for that late in the season, but I remember what I was doing on that day in 1977, and now here we are coming up on Saturday, and maybe we'll see snow again on that day.
And I remember it well because I was in the middle of a political science class with one of my favorite high school teachers, Dennis Micah, who I actually ran into a couple of years ago at a reunion. And it started snowing. It was about, I think it was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and of course they turned to me to because I was renowned in my high school regarding weather, and they turned to me to explain it. And it was like, good, geez, I don't know.
and
So
now, and now, of course, all of these years later, I mean, we were just discussing off air the fact that it's going to turn incredibly cold, especially in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere. The 850 temperature, that's about
well,
a
let me bring
40.
that up. Let's bring up the 850 temperature maps. I'll bring up. We'll use the. Let's go to the NAM, and we'll take a look at that. And as soon as it loads, well, I have the GFS up in front of me, so we can actually look at that. And actually, when you look at the 850 temperature right now, believe it or not, the zero line, we're less than zero here. So
Right.
it's cold aloft even with this particular system. So it goes to show you how time of you take this and kind of if you translate it back to January or February or even early March, probably would have been seeing some snow today. But yeah, when we get to Saturday morning, Joe, it's on the GFS. It's 0, -3, -6, -9 Celsius.
Isn't that amazing?
That at 4,700 ish feet.
Right.
This is really cold for this time of
This
year. This is really cold.
I read a statement, not a statement, but the technical discussion last night out of Norton, Massachusetts. It's so kind of weird in my lifetime. First, the National Weather Service in Boston was located in Boston. Then they moved to Taunton. This
Right.
was not long ago, like 20 some odd years ago. And now they're no longer in Taunton. Now they're in Norton, Massachusetts. But in any case, the forecaster on duty last night was saying that the 850 temperatures on Saturday are practically about as low as they ever have been observed in the month of May. So we're
Really?
looking at really an incredible, and they're talking about record low highs. In other words, high temperatures that were maybe no better than the low or mid 40s up in Boston. This is crazy.
It is crazy. Here's the -9 on the NAM model for Saturday morning, and you can see it right there. It actually goes down as far south as touching the North Carolina Virginia border. The freezing line or the zero line by Saturday morning is well off the coast, down almost into South Carolina. So indeed, this is a this is a it's a rare thing to see this time of year. But you know what? You had a fairly unusual setup with the polar vortex breaking down and cold air that streaming from northern Canada, what's left of the wintertime cold air. This is part of the process, folks, by the way, where the atmosphere is basically getting rid of all the Arctic air that it built up in the Arctic and locked it up there.
Right.
The Earth is just basically doing its job in the northern hemisphere, just taking that air and just delivering it, spreading it out, getting rid of it. The sun is warming it up there slowly but surely every day. So before you know it, it will be gone. So these are the waning shots that are coming down. Watches and warnings tonight. There really isn't a whole lot happening. There's some frost and freeze issues back in western Pennsylvania down into West Virginia, and frost issues in Ohio down into the mountains of Tennessee and western Virginia. You've got red flag issues with dry conditions in New Mexico, Colorado, parts of Colorado, and into southern Arizona, and a few counties in Southern California. You also have, oddly enough, because I mean it seems like they've been getting showers and thunderstorms nonstop, but they've got red flag issues in southern Mississippi and over the Florida Panhandle and southern Alabama. That's almost hard to fathom, considering they've been in an alleyway of thunderstorms pretty much for the last month or so. But the thing is, it also gets very dry in between cold fronts. And with that strong May sun down there, things dry up in a hurry. By the way, we should mention that we've got coastal flood advisories up for Long Island and parts of southern New England down to Delaware and even into parts of Virginia and North Carolina, the coastline, for minor coastal flooding thanks to the full moon and this offshore low.
Correct. Tonight, actually, tomorrow morning at 6:45, the moon officially turns full. So if you're up at the crack of dawn tomorrow, you will see the moon when it's 100% illuminated. But also perigee, when it's closest to the Earth, actually occurred yesterday. So the fact that perigee comes a couple of days before the full moon means that it's not really and truly, as some of the media are calling it, a super moon.
It's a somewhat super moon.
It's a somewhat supermoon, but the thing is that um, usually when the moon is at its closest point to the Earth or perigee, it takes about a day or two. There's a tidal lag, so to speak, for the highest tides, and those high tides will be highest tonight and again tomorrow night. So we have coastal flood advisories for tonight. It would not be surprising if the Weather Service had them up again for tomorrow night one more time, and then
We'll get rid of them.
the ending will be done with for a while.
The radar is not overly impressive. I mean, there is rain covering eastern and central Pennsylvania down into Maryland, New Jersey, Long Island, just south of, just close to you, Joe, Connecticut, and moving up into Massachusetts. Most of what's here is on the light side. We also have a few heavier showers popping up now, moving across North Carolina as of 7:15 Eastern time. And around the rest of the country, it's actually pretty quiet. There's a little action up in the Northwest, and of course, that's with that shortwave we pointed out. And then we have a little bit of action south of the border there, the Texas-Mexico border, west of Brownsville to about Laredo, a little bit of shower and thunderstorm activity. But the Storm Prediction Center has no severe weather forecast for today at all. No organized severe weather. We do have some risk setting up for tomorrow in the southern plains, where we have a slight risk in Oklahoma and parts of north and northwest Texas, inside an area of marginal risk. And then when we move to day 3, there's a small area of marginal risk in southeast Texas and over much of Louisiana and a small part of Mississippi. But there's no widespread severe weather outbreak in the cards, probably for the next, certainly for the next 3 or 4 days. After that, it becomes a little more muddled as we go into next week. So we'll deal with that when we get there. Meanwhile, take a look at this upper air, Mr. Rayo, because I've got this is the HREF model. So it overlays not only those lovely height lines, but you can also see the actual where the strongest jet stream is. And of course, starting with present conditions, we have this weak upper low in western Pennsylvania. You see that trough in the east really is just kind of stretched out and what we call a positive tilt. It sort of gets squashed a bit as it moves toward the coastline. But look behind it. The two things to look for behind it, of course, the first thing is, as we pointed out on the satellite loop, the system in the Pacific Northwest, and that's this shortwave trough here, and that's moving, going to be moving east southeast. But it's this area up in here that's coming down from Canada that is going to be the driver in the pattern, because when we go forward, what happens is that trough digs down, and now you got that northern Rockies plains shortwave moving southeast, and then part of the jet in the north, you'll see that part of that jet just kind of moves into New England. That actually brings in some colder air to our north on Friday, and then there's another arm here that is swinging around. That's going to phase with that southern stream shortwave later Friday night, and into Saturday as it swings towards the East Coast. That is going to be that is the driver here in the upper air with regards to this weather system that we're going to be dealing with.
In fact, yesterday I thought to myself that that first system moving on by, and then the other system that's going to come in and impact us for Friday and Saturday. It's almost as if you took silly putty, so to speak, and stretched it out, and eventually it breaks apart into two separate entities. The second entity, of course, being the one that will affect us on Friday night, Saturday.
So I got the NAM up. The NAM is, but now the GFS, I noticed the late afternoon GFS is actually a little colder, and it's not that much different than the NAM. The NAM gets a little bit crazy with the solid blue area of snow. But before we get there, this low pulls out tonight. So weather conditions are going to improve overnight, and I think tomorrow should be a reasonable day. We'll have some sunshine. It'll be a bit breezy, and a little breezy, not overly breezy, just a little breezy. And temperatures will probably just reflexively go into the 60s because, well, it's May 7th tomorrow, and the average high is getting closer and closer to 70 degrees now. So a reflex back to the 60s is almost automatic this time of year. And then
Right.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm just going to say that tomorrow probably is going to be the nicest day we're going to have around here for some days to come. After tomorrow, it all goes rapidly downhill. But tomorrow's going to be good, even though the temperatures are going to be averaging maybe about 2 to 6 degrees below normal. Still, as you mentioned, Joe, it's going to be in the 60s tomorrow, probably in many areas mid or upper 60s. We'll have a fair amount of sun, especially early in the day, maybe some cloud buildup later in the day tomorrow. But overall, a very, very lovely day tomorrow. And then the bottom falls out of the thermometer and everything goes south on us for Friday and on into the start of the weekend.
So when we go to Friday morning, our low is getting ready to come out of the southern plains. But there's this weak cold front that moves through here tomorrow night. You probably won't even notice it very much. But that whole frontal boundary goes back to that low that's down in the southern plains. That's that first part of that northern stream energy that kind of moves into New England. And then that second arm comes around. Here's your big high that's out to the west of the Dakotas. And now you're getting that cold flow of air behind it. And of course, you'll notice that you see a little snow there breaking out across northern Indiana, northern Ohio. That's the impact of that first part of that energy going into New England brings down a little bit of cold air. And then as the trough swings around and starts to phase, that southern stream low comes out very quickly. It doesn't the now when you look at these models, sometimes for whatever reason you have to look for the closed isobar. because it doesn't always print the L out. There's a little closed isobar there, Friday
Right.
afternoon at 2 o'clock in southern Kentucky. And your frontal boundary is kind of right on top of us, right on top of New York City. And that low is basically going to ride that boundary. So moving along, you start to bring that precip in, and of course the NAM wants to have snow on the northwestern edge of this through much of West Virginia, and then of course this is at 11 p.m. on Friday night. If you want to believe the NAM, it's got snow falling in northwest New Jersey and in eastern Pennsylvania and in the Hudson Valley. I don't know. I kind of think that might be just a tad overdone, but nonetheless, we know that it's going to be cold and turning colder aloft. Uh, there should be enough there that if we get a little bit of precip intensity and that cold air can mix down. Yeah, there should be some wet snow mixed in. If you're above 1,500 feet, you get up to the Catskills, the Poconos, the Berkshires. Those areas may do a bit better with this. By Saturday morning, the low is in the Gulf of Maine, and now, of course, now we're dealing with this strengthening gradient uh, that's going to mean gusty winds on Saturday. And I think temperatures, Joe, Saturday are going to have a real rough time getting out of the 40s in a lot of spots here.
Yeah, no question about it. I've seen a couple of forecasters who have remarked that this is going to be more like a day in mid or late March. I prefer to go the other way. I've been saying that this day, Saturday, it's going to feel more like mid-November. You can relate more to, if we're talking about outlandish situations. We've just come out of March, but you think about November.
Where it's
November,
yeah, where the temperatures are reasonable most of the time, and you still have the leftover vestiges of warmer days, and then you get like these cold shots that last briefly. I agree. Probably matches up better that way. Here's the GFS. So GFS is maybe a little. I think the GFS may have a little bit more of a realistic view with that northern edge of snow to an extent. It does bring through some heavy precip here during Saturday night. Uh, the radar echoes are fairly impressive on the
Friday,
GFS. I'm going to bring up the sounding.
you said Saturday night for the heavy pre.
Oh no, I meant
Friday,
Friday night. I'm sorry.
right, right.
So at on the GFS, I'm sorry. I gotta just clean my glasses just a little bit. I'm bringing up the sounding, and it looks like it has a surface temperature in New York City at 2 a.m. of 38, and the freezing level is really just above the surface. It's not that far above the surface. So if
Right.
you get the intensity that those snowflakes are going to make it down to the surface, and also the GFS as it wraps that low up in the Gulf of Maine produces what looks like a band of pretty hefty snow for coastal Maine back down to Boston. It'll be interesting to see if that holds up or not. And then of course the same idea, that tight gradient for later Saturday, and in fact Saturday afternoon. You see how the model generates snow showers in New England and upstate New York and back through western Pennsylvania. That's the upper trough going by, the very deep, cold upper trough, and you can see it here. That super dark blue on the 500 millibar map. That's a powerhouse upper low that is swinging through New England. And that's going to leave us with cold air for Sunday, although I think Sunday the temperatures may try to reflexively bounce into the 50s. So there should be some recovery with more sunshine. We have another short wave that's dropping in and dropping southeastward. There's an upper low, Joe, on the GFS Monday afternoon in western Pennsylvania that moves right overhead Monday night. And I was looking at this and I'm wondering whether there might be um, maybe with this, it's a little hard to tell. That's a pretty good shortwave trough. I just wonder whether there might be a rumble or two of thunder with that Monday afternoon.
Sure, why not?
Why not? Put it in there with the locusts, right?
I tell you, this is it's just absolutely
And
amazing.
that low deepens, by the way. It gets down pretty low there, down into the 980s. I'm sorry, 990s. Oh, my God, I should have cleaned my glasses before I did the show tonight. I'm having a little tough time here reading the numbers. It looks like a 998 low and then a 995 and then a 92 over Nova Scotia after Tuesday. The other thing I noticed too in the longer range, uh, we're kind of zeroing in on the idea that maybe around the 15th or so of the month, uh, this cold pattern finally starts to relax a little bit, and that's going to mean that this whole upper trough in the east is going to have to pull out. And it does do that. It does relax around the middle part of next week. The flow becomes more west southwest later next week and into next weekend. Although we still have stuff going on in Canada with shortwave swinging around, that's probably going to bring some cold fronts through every couple of days. But at least we might be able to warm up in between them to something to like what we saw maybe over the weekend, where we were able to warm up, into to 70 at least, or into the 70s. Um, just kind of throwing that out there at this point.
It
And
seems
go
it
ahead.
seems like I would say around the 14th or 15th we may see a flip, not a big flip of a coin, but certainly a push toward something a lot different than what we're looking at for the end of the week into the weekend in terms of cold temperatures. We may actually begin to press back closer to normal. In fact, by mid and later this month, we hope.
Uh, I do have one other. I do want to show what the WPC folks think about what they think about this. Uh, excuse me. So I have the probability of at least 2 inches. This is for Friday night into Saturday morning, and the brown is 1 to 5%. Okay, so that's 2 inches now into Northeast PA and up the Hudson Valley to about Albany, Western Mass, Northwest Connecticut. You got to, in my view, for a likelihood of at least 2 inches, you got to look at least the green that represents 30%, which is the not the lightest shade of green, but the next shade, the slightly darker shade of green. And you see that across Northwest PA, Southwest New York. And then there's a fairly large area where the probability goes way up when you move up from the Catskills and then on northward up into the Adirondacks, where you're talking about a probability of 60 to 70% for 2 inches. I did also have the 1 inch, and the 5% probability of an inch gets down to about White Plains and southern Connecticut. So that's for 1 inch. So I don't think it's unreasonable that along the coastal areas might see some wet snowflakes and a cheap thrill. For May, a cheap thrill is when you see a couple of snowflakes banging on the windshield.
If
And
if you
excuse me.
you get a reasonable area of lake effect on Saturday, and there's no question that that is certainly a distinct possibility, with winds that likely will reach advisory criteria of over 40 miles per hour, maybe even 50 around here. I could see some of that snow shower activity getting blown all the way clear across downwind from in a southeasterly direction and into the immediate New York City metropolitan area. Even though the parameters, the probability of precipitation might be, let's say, less than 20%, there's still that chance that you may see a snow shower or flurry get blown literally.
I totally agree. I think there's going to be some snow shower, rain and snow showers around, some grapple. Who knows? With that upper trough as cold as it is, uh, maybe you might even see some low top convection. You brought that up yesterday, and I think that certainly is a possibility. So it probably wouldn't be too much of a stretch, by the way. And I don't know that this is going to happen or not, but if we do wind up seeing some flakes here on Friday, and then who knows, maybe a week or two later, we'll get the first named tropical storm someplace.
I tell you, weird weather. I just want to mention, I mentioned this book, and I forgot that it's not actually a book, it's actually 2 volumes. For those of you who are interested, it may still be available. It's been long out of print. Thankfully, I actually have 2 hard-covered versions of this. Early American Winters, 1604 to 1820, by David Ludlam, the great weather historian who passed away in 1997. This is volume 1, and this is volume 2, Early American Winters 2, from 1821 to 1870. Now, if you want to find out anything about the winter, during the 18th and 19th centuries here in the Northeast, these are the books to get. I officially, Joe, the latest based on Central Park observations, New York City observations, the latest that we've ever seen snow is May the 9th. That was again back in 1977. However, um, regarding unusually late snowfalls, again using these two books, there was the great mid-May snow of 1834. New York experienced snow squalls during the night of May 15th and 16th of that year, 1834. William Redfield noticed ice in the gutters of his street the next morning at 8 o'clock in the morning. Some thermometers in the city proper dropped to as low as 28 degrees at sunrise. This is in 1834. But even later than that was Sunday, May 25th, 1845. Snowflakes fell at the corner of 14th Street and Irving Place. At McComb's Dam, the ground appeared white for some moments. Harlem snow also fell in quantity. Mercury, this is May 25th, 1845. Mercury was 38 degrees early Sunday. And interestingly, if you want to go even further, on June 10th and 11th, 1842, snow fell in Cleveland, snow fell in Harrisburg, snow fell in Boston. The Catskills were whitened, the higher Appalachians in Pennsylvania and Maryland were whitened, but not in New York City. So it seems that in an unofficial sense, the latest in the calendar that snow was observed in the Big Apple occurred in the early part of the 19th century, that on the 25th of May, 1845.
Wow.
Wow.
So let me just really fast, Joe. I just want to show everybody the Weather Service digital forecast for snow amounts. Where you see this sort of lightish blue, that's basically a coating to an inch. And I know, Johnny Quest, north and west of I-81, they're showing up, especially on the West Virginia side, showing a coating to maybe a couple of inches there. I expect these numbers to get massaged higher tomorrow when not all the offices are putting their forecasts out at the same time. So like there's this big gaping hole in southwestern New York. Obviously, there's going to be some snow there, so we'll look for those numbers to go up. Chuck Cardillo, you mentioned the Catskills. There's a 5 print up there. What did we decide that that spot was?
In the Catskills?
Yeah,
Did we say that that might have been Hunter Mountain?
yeah, maybe that's Hunter. But anyway, there's a 2 print and a 5 print there, and I think they're going to probably, again, it's all going to depend on elevation. So tomorrow when we look at this, the Weather Service, I'm sure is going to show nudge some of these numbers up, and the missing offices will add in some numbers too, and some initial views with regards to Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. It's basically a 1 to 3. 2 to 4 snowfall, although I do see a 6 print there up in central Maine. But hey, it's May. It can still snow in Maine. Why not, right? So let's do
May is mud season.
yes. So let's do a quick Briller Jeopardy tonight, so you can get on to your Met game.
It could
And
al- it could also be, Joe. I'm just looking at a map here in New York State. It could also be Slide Mountain at 4,204 feet. And the town surrounding that spot, that 5 inch total, Big Indian and Chichester, Woodstock, West Hurley, Ashkoken. So yeah, that might be that's the area at least for
um,
5 inches that they're calling for.
all right, so here's the trivia tonight on Briller Jeopardy. The category tonight is Academy Awards. So 3 films have won 11 Academy Awards. Can you name the 3?
Uh,
I've seen all 3. So
you see, the problem is I'm not really a big movie goer. In fact, the last movie I saw, what was the last movie? I can't even remember the last movie I saw. It was actually some years. No, I actually did see Mr. Rogers with
oh,
Tom.
okay.
So, but I really don't think I can
Well,
start those 3.
the first one is 11 was in 1959.
Oh, 1959. See, if it were 55, I'd say Marty, but
No, I like a good movie, very good movie, Marty.
yeah.
Ernest Borgnine, Best Actor Oscar for that one, and
Right.
also I think they won for. Did they win for Best Picture? I forget. I have to.
I think they did.
It may have won for Best Picture.
They did.
1959, Ben Hur.
Ben Hur.
But
Okay.
the sequel about Ben Hur's sister didn't do quite as well. Ben
And
Him. Okay, you knew that was coming. The second one was in 1997.
1997?
Yes,
That recently?
yes.
Chariots of Fire?
No, no, no. That was back in the 80s.
Okay.
1997 was the Titanic,
Okay.
which goes back to an old joke when I worked at NBC back in the early 80s. The joke was the only difference between NBC and the Titanic was that the
Yep.
Titanic had entertainment.
Yes.
Okay. And the last one was in 2003, which was based on a trilogy. And they waited for the last. They basically waited, although all three movies were nominated for various awards along the way, including Best Picture. They basically waited till the third movie to give all the awards, and that was Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. But it was
Yes.
they basically gave Peter Jackson the Oscar because of the all three of the movies combined in the trilogy.
Right. Okay.
I know that you're a better person for this now that you know. By the way, before you go, because we forgot to mention it, uh, the Murder Hornets.
Yes. That's coming.
That's
What
coming to a theater. That's
now?
coming to a house near you soon.
Uh, I hope not. I
No, yeah,
Yeah.
no, those are. Although
I found
I understand that they are also delicious. Apparently, they're a delicacy in some nations.
really
Yes, the Murder Hornets.
well. At least they're big enough. Why not? Ah,
Yeah, ew. I mean, it is protein, I guess, if you're starving and you have to eat something. But yeah, I've been watching a lot of Planet Earth on Netflix with David Attenborough. The next thing, well, locusts are being done. There was a whole thing about locusts flying through parts of Africa and devastating, areas in Kenya and the 17-year locust. Uh, I just don't want something like the dung beetle. The dung beetle, uh, by its name, lives on dung, and it likes to roll the dung up in balls and then roll the balls to their dens. So if we start seeing balls of brown stuff like rolling along on grassy surfaces or roadways, that'll be a sign that the dung beetle may be invading.
Joe,
Bye.
you know what I'm about to do?
You're about to sign off. Yes. All right, folks. Everybody have a good night. Let me just remind everybody, by the way, next Tuesday, I will be doing a virtual library appearance on at the for the Westwood Library in Westwood, New Jersey. But it will be a virtual one, so I will be doing it from here. So we're going to figure it all out, and hopefully, I'll be able to also show it live. So keep your fingers crossed on that. Other than that, stay safe, social distancing, blah, blah, blah. And we'll see you tomorrow. Good night, everybody.